Here today, just as it has done for over 100 years, the Silverton line readies itself for the morning run up the canyon. For a time in the 1880s, the narrow gauge train from Denver via the Royal Gorge arrived Durango with its through Pullmans at 4:25 in the afternoon and left 10 minutes later for Silverton. But for as long as there has been passenger service, there has always been a morning accommodation train. In the 1890s, the through train ended at 8:20 p.m. at Durango, having left Denver at 7:30 in the evening the previous day, and Silverton passengers spent the night in Durango and caught the train at 7:30 the next morning. The construction camp that carried the railroad through the gorge of the Animas beyond Rockwood was located about here. Hermosa was first settled in 1873. The post office, established in 1874, received its mail via trails over the mountains to Silverton and thence down the Animas Canyon. Actual construction of the Silverton line was a continuation of progress from the east. The line reached town in August 1881 and kept going, arriving Rockwood in January 1882 and Silverton that July. The paint scheme on the passenger cars, which the railroad termed Rio Grande Gold, originated on a combine used in the filming of Ticket to Tomahawk. Soon afterward, the railroad adopted it as standard for passenger cars. Similarly, the idea of diamond stacks originated with a Hollywood film crew. The powerful 480 and 490 series, now used by the Durango and Silverton, could never be called for Silverton duty during Rio Grande operation of the line. Several of the bridges were not strong enough for them. Doubleheading of the 470 class was a common practice as the Rio Grande struggled to handle the increasing crowds of tourists and rail fans in the 60s. Later still, during the busiest part of the season, 2 sections were instituted. Considering that only 3 Class 470 engines remained on the roster, this became at times a juggling act between dispatcher and repair crews. Beyond the bridge, the railroad parallels and is sometimes laid upon the original Animas Canyon toll road, built by the Reitman brothers in 1876. This road served Silverton from just north of Durango. At this point, the road left the riverbed, southbound, and climbed Cascade Hill in a series of switchbacks. It then dove down on Rockwood in a hair-raising grade. Needleton was the takeoff point for miners headed for the rich ore districts in the Needle Mountains and the Chicago Basin 6 miles to the east. This car was originally an open platform coach. When the Rio Grande decided to upgrade passenger service in 1937, it was rebuilt to a closed vestibule. At that time, electric lights replaced the coal oil lamps. Steam heat was substituted for the pot-bellied stoves. Reclining seats and less primitive toilets were installed. These innovations were an answer to the rising tide of bus and automobile competition. The parlor cars had a stainless steel kitchen and dinette section added. For the first time, you could dine en route. And if you purchased your ticket in advance, you could order special items, such as steak, which the steward would purchase before departure. Before the coming of the railroad, it cost $60 a ton to ship freight by pack train between Durango and Silverton. In August 1882, the railroad was charging $12 a ton. Threat of abandonment hung over the Silverton for more than 20 years. At one point, the railroad tried to give the line away to a foundation. In 1961, it applied to the Interstate Commerce Commission for permission to abandon it. The request was flatly rejected. Not only did the railroad serve a public need, said the commission, but it produced a substantial profit for its owners. This rejection prompted a reversal of policy by the Rio Grande. They decided secretly on an ambitious plan of development. Much of the property along Main Street, as far north as 6th and Durango, was quietly optioned, including 2 hotels. The depot at Durango was renovated. 2 entirely new coaches were built. They were all steel construction, but closely resembled the old style. They had clear-story roofs, fake truss rods, coal stoves, and the sides were scribed to resemble wood sheathing. Even the kerosene lamps, removed in 1937, were painstakingly restored. Y, shown here at Elk Park, was the only one between Rockwood and Silverton. It was built primarily to turn trains in winter. Despite the reputation of the Colorado Rockies as a generator of fearsome winter weather, most of the time a simple pilot plow sufficed to clear the Silverton line. Yet winter shut the Silverton, sometimes for months. In 1916, the line was closed from February 10th to mid-May. In 1951, from December 26th to March 24th. It wasn't the depth of the snow, it was the avalanches, as much as 40 feet deep over the tracks, and some of them hundreds of yards wide. Slides occurred in the final 6 miles of the run between Elk Park and Silverton. Usually they held rocks and logs which precluded use of the rotaries. Cuts were gingerly plowed, shoveled by hand, or, on occasion, even tunneled through. Over the years, 30 slide locations were identified all north of Elk Park. Thus, the initial reason for the Y. When it became necessary to stop the trains here, passengers, mail, and baggage often continued on from Elk Park across the snow on foot or by mule. Flooding was almost as grave a danger to the line as avalanche. On 4 separate occasions since 1909, high water has carried away as much as 6 miles of the line at a time.